What if I told you that while you're asleep tonight, a force far greater than your own effort is already working tirelessly to fill your life with wealth, blessing, and opportunities you can't even imagine? Many of us spend our lives chasing success, working day and night, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. We think wealth is something we earn only with sweat and effort. But what if I tell you there is a secret principle, a divine strategy, where God Himself is creating your wealth while you rest, while you sleep, while you simply believe? Tonight, I want you to lean in closely, because by the end of this message, you will never see your rest, your dreams, or even your sleep the same way again. You will discover how to align your life with this supernatural law of prosperity and awaken to a life overflowing with abundance that is already being prepared for you. Stay with me, because this message can change the trajectory of your life forever. Faith is not just a word we whisper in church or a feeling that stirs in our hearts. It is the power that moves mountains, the invisible force that can unlock doors of wealth and abundance even while we sleep. Many people misunderstand faith, thinking it is only about believing that things will happen. They limit it to wishful thinking, a hope that tomorrow will be better than today. But true faith is far more powerful than that. Faith is a spiritual law, a supernatural engine that activates God's promises. When you step into faith, you are stepping into a realm where God is already working, where the unseen is becoming real, where wealth, opportunities, and blessings are being prepared for you in ways your human eyes cannot yet perceive. Think about it for a moment. The world's greatest achievements, the wealthiest nations, the most prosperous individuals, none of their success can be explained by effort alone. Someone somewhere sowed a seed in faith. They believed in something unseen, and God responded to that faith. While the world was skeptical, they acted in obedience to the divine principle that faith activates God's creative power. This is exactly what happens when God creates your wealth while you sleep. Your labor, your efforts, your hard work are important, yes, but faith is what unleashes the supernatural dimension of your prosperity. Faith is what tells heaven, I believe you are already working for me, and heaven begins to respond. Every seed you plant in faith, no matter how small, becomes a magnet for abundance. You may feel that your contributions, your prayers, or even your acts of kindness are insignificant, but they are not. When you sow a seed in faith, you are cooperating with the divine principle that multiplies the unseen. The principle is simple yet profound. What you give in faith comes back to you multiplied. It is not about the size of the seed. It is about the sincerity and expectation of your heart. This is why God's people in the Bible, whether they were tithing, giving offerings, or acting in obedience, were always promised blessings that exceeded their imagination. Every act of faith is a declaration to heaven that you are ready to receive, and God is faithful to respond. Consider Abraham, the father of faith, who was promised a great nation even though he was old and childless. He did not see the fulfillment of the promise immediately, but he believed in the unseen. His faith activated God's creative power. While he lived his daily life, God was already working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances, aligning nations, and preparing a legacy that would span generations. In the same way, your faith today is the lever that moves the spiritual forces needed to bring your wealth into reality. While you rest tonight, God is already responding to the faith you have sown in prayer, in giving, in expectation. Faith also changes the way you see opportunities. When a faithful person walks into a situation, doors appear that were invisible to others. Business connections, career advancements, financial solutions all begin to manifest because faith aligns you with God's timing and direction. Wealth is not simply a result of human effort. It is the outcome of spiritual alignment. By believing in what God has promised, you position yourself in the current of divine provision. While you sleep, while your mind rests, heaven is orchestrating events to bring your vision to life. Your faith is the key that unlocks this supernatural movement, the signal that tells the universe to start working on your behalf. Many people struggle financially because they rely solely on their own hands and intellect. They exhaust themselves, thinking that wealth must be earned exclusively through labor. Yet God's principle is clear. Faith, not effort alone, activates supernatural wealth. When you operate in faith, your work is multiplied in ways that human understanding cannot calculate. You may plant a small business idea, a creative project, or a simple act of generosity, and God multiplies it while you rest. Faith invites God's intervention, and that intervention transforms ordinary endeavors into extraordinary results. Faith also teaches patience and endurance. Sometimes the results of our faith are not immediate, and this is where many give up. But the unseen is always at work. Every moment you hold on to faith, every act of obedience, every step taken in expectation is like watering a seed planted deep in the soil. The growth may not be visible now, but God is already nurturing it. While you sleep, while you dream, while your life seems paused, God is moving in ways beyond your imagination. He is preparing contracts, opening markets, multiplying resources, and placing opportunities strategically in your path. Faith is the bridge between the invisible promise and the visible fulfillment. And every night that you rest in belief, God strengthens that bridge. Faith also brings peace. When you know that God is already creating your wealth, you are freed from anxiety, worry, and fear. You can sleep in confidence, knowing that what belongs to you is already being prepared. Your mind is not weighed down by stress or doubt, because faith declares that the unseen is already at work. This peace is essential because worry blocks the flow of divine provision. When you trust, when you expect, when you believe, you position yourself to receive God's blessings fully. Faith transforms your sleep into a spiritual laboratory where God engineers breakthroughs and wealth while you recharge your body and spirit. Finally, faith invites miracles into your financial life. Miracles are not random. They are the result of divine laws in action. Faith is the channel through which God's miraculous provision flows. Every tithe, every seed of generosity, every act of obedience, every word spoken in expectation of God's promises becomes a spiritual transaction that heaven honors. While you sleep, God is orchestrating circumstances, connecting the right people, opening doors, and aligning events to manifest the wealth you have believed for. The unseen world is bustling with activity on your behalf, and your faith is the signal that tells heaven, this is ready to be released. Many people misunderstand rest. They see it as inactivity, as idleness, as a pause in productivity. But in the spiritual realm, rest is not a sign of laziness. It is a strategy. It is a divine principle that God has built into the rhythm of life. While the world rushes, hustles, and strives, the person who understands the power of rest operates on a higher level, a level where wealth, provision, and opportunities are being created supernaturally. God himself rested after creation, not because he was tired, but to establish the pattern for his children. Rest is a sacred invitation to trust that God is already at work, even when our human eyes cannot see it. When you sleep at night, you enter into a period of rest that is more than physical. It is a spiritual opportunity for God to work in ways beyond your imagination. Your body may be resting, but heaven is active. Your finances, your career, your relationships, your future, all are being orchestrated while you are in a state of surrender and trust. This is why the Bible says, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." Sleep is not a passive state. It is a moment when God's supernatural forces can operate freely on your behalf. Many believers exhaust themselves thinking that wealth and success are the results of constant effort. They work day and night, neglecting their bodies, their families, and even their spiritual growth. But this approach, while seemingly productive, often limits the supernatural multiplication that God intends. God's economy is not bound by human labor alone. While effort can produce results, faith and rest invite God's intervention to multiply what human hands cannot. When you rest, you are acknowledging that God is your provider, that his timing is perfect, and that he is already creating the wealth you desire. Rest is also a moment of renewal. While you sleep, your body repairs itself, your mind processes experiences, and your spirit is refreshed. But more importantly, your rest allows God to replenish your spiritual resources. Divine strategies, new ideas, solutions to problems, and insights often come during periods of quiet and stillness. This is why many of the greatest breakthroughs in history happened when people paused, prayed, and trusted. Sleep, meditation, and spiritual rest are not wasted hours. They are incubators for God's creative work. When you understand the power of rest, you begin to see that God's wealth is not just about labor, it is about alignment with his timing and purpose. While you rest, the unseen realm is active, moving circumstances, preparing opportunities, and orchestrating events in your favor. The doors that remain closed while you struggle are opened in moments of surrender. While the world is busy trying to force results through human effort, the faithful rest in the confidence that God is already working behind the scenes. This is why rest is not a luxury. It is a spiritual strategy, a divine law that must be embraced for wealth to manifest fully. Many people struggle because they misunderstand their role in God's process. They feel they must control everything, push everything, and manage every detail. But God's supernatural wealth cannot be controlled by human hands. It flows when we trust, when we obey, and when we allow God to work while we rest. This is the essence of faith, believing that God is already creating what we cannot see, that He is moving on our behalf, and that our rest is not wasted but multiplied. Every hour of sleep, every moment of trust, every act of surrender becomes an opportunity for heaven to align itself with our lives. The principle of rest is seen throughout Scripture. King David understood this when he said, "I lie down and sleep. I wake again, for the Lord sustains me." He recognized that his rest was not passive but active in the spiritual sense, because God was sustaining him while he slept. Joseph too experienced God's orchestration while he rested, even in the midst of trials and imprisonment. While he was in prison, God was already preparing the way for his promotion, his wealth, and his destiny. This pattern repeats throughout the lives of God's faithful children. While they rest, God works. The secret is not merely physical sleep. It is trusting God enough to step back and allow Him to create the outcome. Rest also teaches patience. Often, people become frustrated when they do not see immediate results from their efforts. They measure progress in hours, days, or weeks, not realizing that God operates on a different timetable. While we rest and wait, God is at work, aligning resources, arranging relationships, and preparing opportunities that we could never engineer ourselves. This waiting period is essential because it builds our faith, strengthens our spiritual resilience, and positions us to receive the blessings fully when they manifest. The impatience that drives people to overwork often blocks the supernatural multiplication that God desires for them. When you rest with expectation, you are not idle, you are partnering with God. Rest becomes an act of faith, a spiritual discipline that releases the divine multiplication of your wealth. It is a declaration that says, "I trust God to work on my behalf even while I am asleep." This mindset changes everything. It shifts your perspective from struggle to expectation, from scarcity to abundance, and from human effort to divine provision. While your hands are still, your faith activates the supernatural forces that bring wealth, opportunities, and favor into your life. Rest also aligns your spirit with God's creative work. When you are at peace, when you surrender control, and when you trust that God is already working, your spirit becomes receptive to divine strategies. Solutions to problems, new ideas for business, sudden opportunities, and unexpected financial breakthroughs often come in moments of rest. The world measures productivity by visible action, but God measures it by faith and alignment with His timing. The more you embrace rest as a spiritual principle, the more you tap into the invisible currents of wealth and provision that are constantly moving in your favor. Finally, rest protects your vision and your anointing. Exhaustion, stress, and overwork can cloud your judgment, dull your spiritual sensitivity, and block the flow of divine insight. But when you rest, you renew your mind, your body, and your spirit. You create a fertile environment for God's wealth to manifest. While the world is chasing, struggling, and competing, you are positioned in peace, aligned with the divine, and ready to receive the multiplication of God's promises. Many people live their lives thinking that wealth, provision, and opportunity are things to be chased, earned, or struggled for. They labor day after day, believing that success is the result of human effort alone. But the truth is far greater than that. God has already prepared your wealth. He has already aligned the circumstances, people, and resources that will bring abundance into your life. The challenge is not to work harder or push longer, but to position yourself to receive what God has already created. Too often people overlook the spiritual principle of receiving, and yet receiving is an act of faith just as powerful as giving, praying, or sowing seeds. Your wealth exists in the spiritual realm before it appears in the natural. While you may not see it yet, the resources, opportunities, and blessings you need are already being orchestrated. God has prepared them with precision, timing, and care. Like a master artist who has completed a painting long before it is unveiled, God's work is finished even before you witness the results. Your task is not to doubt, but to align yourself with the plan, to speak the words of faith, to act in obedience, and to expect the fulfillment of His promises. Many believers struggle financially because they fail to recognize the importance of expectation. They pray, they sow, they ask, but they lack the confident expectation that God's provision is ready and waiting. Faith without expectation is like planting a seed and then doubting it will grow. God's wealth is already prepared. It is the expectation and belief of His children that unlocks its manifestation. Every time you speak words of faith, declare blessings over your life, and envision abundance, you are opening the door for God's wealth to flow into your life. You are not creating it yourself. You are simply receiving what has already been prepared. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. He did not earn his position in Egypt through human effort alone. While he was in the pit and later in prison, God had already prepared a path for him to rise to power. The grain, the storehouses, the position of Pharaoh, all were already aligned. Joseph's faith, integrity, and patience positioned him to receive what God had prepared. Similarly, your faith positions you to receive the wealth God has already created for you. Your obedience, your prayers, your generosity, and your alignment with God's principles are the channels through which His preparation is released into your life. Receiving God's wealth requires clarity of vision. You must know what God has promised you, and you must declare it with confidence. Too many people wait passively, hoping that blessings will fall into their lap, not realizing that receiving requires intentionality. You must see your wealth, believe it, and act in harmony with that belief. While you sleep, while you rest, while you trust, God is already arranging people, resources, and circumstances to manifest what you have envisioned. Your expectation is the key that opens the doors already prepared in the unseen. Another principle of receiving is gratitude. Gratitude is a powerful spiritual magnet that attracts God's wealth. When you recognize that God has already prepared blessings for you and you thank Him for them in advance, you create an atmosphere in your spirit for multiplication. Gratitude is more than politeness. It is a declaration of faith. It says, "I see your hand at work, Lord. I acknowledge your provision even before it appears." This kind of faith-filled gratitude positions you to receive far beyond what human effort alone could achieve. Many people fail to receive because they focus on lack rather than provision. They measure their circumstances, not their Creator. But God's wealth does not depend on current conditions. While you may face challenges, debts, or limitations, God has already prepared your breakthrough. The unseen is active on your behalf. Every financial miracle, every open door, every unexpected opportunity is being aligned while you sleep, while you work faithfully, while you walk in obedience. Your awareness and your expectation bring it into the realm of manifestation. Receiving also requires speaking in alignment with God's promises. Words are powerful in the spiritual realm. When you declare faith, when you speak blessings over your finances, over your business, over your family, you are activating the spiritual principles that bring God's pre-prepared wealth into your life. Words spoken in faith are like keys that unlock treasures already hidden in the spiritual realm. Every positive declaration, every word of expectation, and every confession of God's abundance positions you to receive fully. Timing is another crucial aspect. God's preparation may not align with human timing, but it is always perfect. Sometimes we become impatient, trying to force results, push opportunities, or accelerate outcomes before God's appointed time. But when we align ourselves with His timing, we position ourselves to receive the fullness of what He has prepared. While you rest, while you trust, while you wait expectantly, God is orchestrating the perfect circumstances for your wealth to appear. The unseen realm does not operate by human schedules. It operates by divine precision, and receiving requires patience and faith in His timing. Faith also requires action in alignment with God's preparation. Receiving is not passive. You must position yourself to receive by acting on the opportunities God places before you, by stepping into the assignments He gives, and by responding to doors that open in faith. The wealth God has prepared will not bypass your responsibility to walk in obedience and action. You must move when the Spirit directs, give when He commands, and trust when it seems uncertain. These actions are the natural expressions of faith that bring the pre-prepared blessings into your tangible life. Finally, understanding that your wealth is already prepared transforms your perspective on life. No longer do you see scarcity, struggle, or competition as your primary reality. Instead, you see abundance, opportunity, and divine favor. This shift in perspective affects your decisions, your attitude, and your spiritual alignment. You begin to operate from a place of expectancy rather than desperation, from confidence rather than fear, from faith rather than doubt. The moment you recognize that God has already prepared your wealth, your life begins to align with the supernatural principle of receiving.